All right, Gabby, how you doing? So I'm going to create this quick video so that you can use it to build the foundation of your Caesar Cipher app, and then the assignment is going to be for you to modify it by creating the decryption portion of it. So I'll walk you through how to do the encryption, and then the decryption pieces you'll need to put together. So this is the user interface. So this is already completely built, so I'm just going to kind of walk you through step by step how this was put together in class last Thursday. So as you can see from the user interface standpoint, we're going to have two text boxes at the top of the screen. And as you're building this, just pause and play as you go along so you can kind of get caught up. So the first text box that we have here is referred to as just plain text. Plain text meaning that this is the area where we're just going to type in a random word, say like the word hello. And then what will happen here in the text box cipher text area is we would have a, once we hit the encrypt word, we will then get the decrypted word, I'm sorry, the encrypted word displayed down here. All right, and so the next area that we have is we have a horizontal arrangement, and then that horizontal arrangement we have a label, a text box, and two buttons. The label is just titled shift, which lets us know exactly how many numbers we are shifting within the alphabet. The text box is to put the number of the shift. And so if we look down here, even though I don't have it checked off right now because I want to show you to do that, we want to make sure that we keep the text box to numbers only because we don't want letters showing up in the shift. Our decryption and encryption protocol will not understand letters, only numbers. All right, so make sure that that gets checked on. And then obviously we have two buttons, which we'll call one encrypt, one decrypt. Then lastly, we have text for label 1 on the bottom here, and this label is primarily to display the Caesar cipher, the standard plain text alphabet, and the encrypted, decrypted, or they should say the shifted alphabet that will show how both will compare. And then from there, you can kind of compare the shifting a 3, and plain text A will equal a letter D for the shifted cipher text. And that's it. There's nothing more that we need to do for our user interface. We just want to keep it simplistic. But again, the important pieces are having the plain text, the text, cipher text, the shift box right here, and then obviously the two buttons to encrypt and decrypt our code. Okay, so let's now head over into the blocks area and let's make sense of what we got going on over here. So I guess maybe to explain a little bit first, we have our two variables that we're going to create. And we have our plain text alphabet and we have our cipher alphabet. Now the plain text alphabet is the alphabet that we want to compare against, and so therefore we need to make sure that we have a string of information in here. The cipher alphabet is what we're eventually going to build once we use the encryption button. So think of it this way, that when we have a text string of letters A through Z, and we're going to assume that we're going to do a shift of 3. Ultimately, what we want to do is, as you can see, we have the A through Z down here. We want to be able to segment or cut off the whatever value of the shift that we're going to use, in this case if we're using 3. And we then are going to want to take that segment and then place it toward the end. So ultimately, we're going to build a cipher alphabet that with a shift of 3 that will start with the letter D and that will end with the letter C. All right, so we're breaking off that and we're building it around. And that's all that we're going to basically be doing within the CaesarEncrypt function and then the cipher alphabet where we are basically segmenting the text off from there. Now, unfortunately, within Apple, there's a little bit of a bug, and this works fine with Android, but so what you're seeing over here is that under the plain alphabet, we start with A through Z, and then directly after I have the capital A, and this will actually go all the way through Z. And if you do not have both the alphabet repeat itself within Apple, what eventually will happen is that the cipher encrypt will work fine, except for the fact that the first letter doesn't, for whatever reason, encrypt properly. All right, it keeps the same value of the first letter of the plain text rather than shifting that as well, but everything else shifts fine. If you double up the string of the alphabet up here, it works totally fine. So just make sure that you put A through Z and then A through Z again up within the plain alphabet, and then that'll take care of that. Okay, so let's look at the cipher alphabet that we build over here. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to build a procedure, all right, because we're going to call this basically 2 times. We're going to call it in the encrypt function. We're then going to call it in the decrypt function as well. So we'll build, this initial by, again, going to procedures and grabbing the top procedure block there. Okay, you can call it whatever you want. I called it init cipher alphabet. And we want to now pass it a parameter, all right? And so what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to click on the cogwheel here and just grab an input and then connect it in to the inputs that we have over here. All right, and that will create a generic parameter called X, so you can just click on that. You can change it to shift if you want. All right, but we want to pass in a value shift because ultimately what we're going to use that value shift for is to basically let the code within here to determine exactly how much we are shifting by, providing it a variable value instead of hard code value. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to go under variables, just pull out a set variable from here, grab a set block, plug it in, all right? And then we're going to, because we created that global plain alphabet, we're going to want to take this plain alphabet and we're going to want to split it up, all right, so that we can actually get the proper shift to occur. So we're going to set that variable. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to uppercase because, again, we want to have no case sensitivity issues. So we're going to just convert this all into uppercase letters. And then what we want to do is we're going to use a join block. So again, go back under text, grab a join block, plug that into the uppercase. Because as I showed before, what we want to do is we want to segment off the first 3 letters, and then we want to then join it with the other segment, like so. So in other words, we create the proper shift that we need. So to find that, we're going to go under our text block, and then at the very bottom of the initial piece here, segment text start and length, we want to grab that, and then we're going to plug that into our code over here. So this block takes 3 inputs. The text is basically the text that we want to segment, okay, which is the plain alphabet variable that we have listed all the way here. The start is where do we exactly want to start the segment from happening. And so we're going to use shift +1. And the reason being is because we want to, if we're shifting 3, all right, we want to cut it off at 3. Therefore, we want to start the text length right at the 4th character. So we want the D to be in the first position, not the C to be in the first position. So we want to cut it off at C so we can eventually join it to the back. So that's why we're doing a shift +1 within the start area. And then the length, because I had to double up the alphabet over here, obviously 26 letters in the alphabet, doubled gives us 52. So we'll do a 52 minus shift. And that basically tells us that if I'm going to cut off the first 3 letters and then start at the 4th character, well, then I want to count the remaining letters that are left. And so the remaining letters obviously would be the 52 letters in the string here, minus the 3 that I'm cutting off. So 52 minus 3 would give us 49. So we should be able to count out 49 more letters once I cut ABC off it and be done with that. So I'm now going to join that with the segment that I am having here. All right, so in essence, this segment basically creates this block here, and then obviously the repeating ABC, A through Z back over here. So this segment down here will now basically take the same plain text alphabet and only segment off. We want to start at the very first character, which again is the letter A. And then I only want to go the length of the shift. And so therefore, if we're going 3 letters, I'm only going to get A, B, and C. And this will segment off this component right here. So in essence, creating these 2 strings. And now we're going to join. And so because this is in this second input area, this is just ABC, which means it's going to be at the end. And this being in the first input area is going to be this component right here. And so when we join these 2 together, concatenate them to, all right, we get starting at the letter D, and then we're ending with the ABC at the end. All right, so that is going to give us the shift. And granted, however much value of the shift we pass in through this parameter, all right, these letters will position themselves accordingly. And then what we want to do is we want to display in our label text, which is that label that is at the bottom down here. We want to show the build of the cipher and versus the plain that we just created. So therefore, we're going to do a join block, and we're going to get the value of the plain alphabet, and then again store that within here. And then we are going to do a \n for the middle input here. \n in a string is a command that just means new line. So we'll carriage down onto a new line. And then we're going to call the global cipher alphabet. And what will happen with this is that when we build the cipher alphabet, all right, it's then going to display that shifted cipher alphabet and then join these together so that they're top and bottom to each other, so you can kind of use as a reference or comparison. All right, so the next thing that we need to do with that is we have to get our button encrypt working. So in order to get the button encrypt working, we're going to use the button encrypt event handler and just grab a button encrypt.click. And we're now going to do two things. One, we have to now build the cipher text. So again, if you remember that the cipher text is this text box right here. So we're going to take the plain text that we're going to type in, hello, for example, hit the encrypt button, and then we're going to build the encrypted word and display it within the text box below. So in order to do that, we are now going to call our CaesarEncrypt function. Now, we haven't built this one yet, and as you can kind of see it off over here. So the first thing we're going to need to do before we plug this in, obviously you're not going to have access to that, so we're going to have to at least go into the procedure area, and we're going to now need to pull out the results procedure. So in App Inventor, this is a sort of, you consider it a standard procedure. Well, this one is called a procedural function, or just a function in general. And the difference between the two is that this is a void component. Oops, I didn't want to do that. The regular procedure is a void component, and its purpose is to basically just have repetitious code within there to abstraction and refactoring to execute the code and nothing more. Okay, but the function that we have here, the procedural function, its purpose is to return a result, hence how the block is set up. Right, so it's going to calculate, some value within the code, and then what it's going to do, it's going to return a result, which is basically this component that we see right over here. Notice the difference, obviously, when we look at these two functions over here. When I call, our method over here, all right, this is basically the method component that we're going to plug into our block, say over here, for example. And its purpose, as I mentioned, we can pass in values, yes, but its purpose is to just execute code, and that's it, all right? But the procedural function that we see over here, all right, has the ability now to return a specific function, or that's the expectation. And so as you see over here with the function CaesarEncrypt, we now have a CaesarEncrypt function call, and this is going to now return a value that's going to get calculated within this procedure and then pass it. Think of it as a get function. It's going to pass it now into the set block here so we can display that value on the screen. So what we're going to do, as we see over here, we're going to pass in two parameters. And so to do that, I just got to click on my mutator wheel, and I'm just going to click and drag and add two blocks within here. All right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to name the first one, as you can see that I did over here, called plain text, and then I'm going to name the second one here, as you see over here, that I called shift. So once I name them plain text and shift, we now will see how we have the call function that is there, and we now have the built-in inputs that we can now pass in, called plain text and shift, and these again are going to be passed in from the encrypt function. This is we're getting from the plain text text box on the screen, and then we're getting the shift from the shift box text box on the screen, okay, which is this component that's right down here. All right, so that's going to pass in the value of how much shift is going to occur, 1 letter, 2 letter, 3 letter, etc. And then the plain text is grabbing the word that we're typing in to the text box on the design screen here. So if we type in the word hello, okay, we're grabbing the word hello and storing it or passing it within to the parameters that we have up there. Okay, so once we kind of scope out that procedure, all right, just by creating and then adding those two parameters, we can then plug in the call function here, and then we get the plain text and the text box shift, obviously, by going into the text boxes over here and scrolling down to grabbing the light green text box.shift.text and then plugging it in. And then we do the same thing with the plain text, where we'd scroll down and grab a light green plain text.text, pull it out, and then plug it in here. Okay, so now we will build the heart of the program, which is the CaesarEncrypt function. All right, so being that we want to return a result, all right, we want to pass the scope of this program into the result so it can then get passed into the text box ciphertext from over here. What we're going to do is we're going to start off by using local variables. So I'm going to go into my variable drawer and I'm going to pass in the function local variable, right? Because it's got this special input that will plug into the results section of my function. All right, and so you can see what I'm going to do over here is I need to make sure that I have 3 local variables built in. All right, right now currently there's only 1. So what I'll do is I'll click on the cogwheel and I'm just going to add in 2 additional components. So we have now 3 local variables built in to this box over here. And we'll rename all 3 of them. As you can see, we have the first one shortened for character, all right, CHR. We got the second one that we're calling index, and we got the third one calling ciphertext. And we're going to initialize the character, all right, to an empty string. And again, that is the purpose of this variable is so that when we pull out the individual letter for like comparison plain text to ciphertext, like in the word hello, we're using pulling out the word H, and then we're going to eventually convert the H into its cipher alphabet, and then E, and then converting that letter, L, converting that letter, and so on and so forth. All right, so that's what we're utilizing the character for. The index value is going to allow us now to kind of go through that alphabet and pull out each individual letter one at a time so that we can actually do the conversion from the plain text to the cipher. And then the ciphertext here we're going to utilize to build that ciphertext alphabet so that we can display the ciphered word that we're going to place within the program. All right, so now because of the fact that we have this local variable that is a function-based variable, all right, we don't have the ability to plug in, you know, like using this the call cipher component here. We have no ability. Oops, let me pull this out first. We have no ability to plug this component in because it is the wrong block. So in order to do that, we need to sort of change the expression scope of this component by going under control and grabbing a do block, which is located right in the middle of the control area here. All right, so what this will do, this will change the scope of what's being asked for. All right, and so this will now allow us to call the method that we have within this procedure here and plug that in. All right, so what we have with this, okay, this is the init cipher alphabet, which is what we created up here. All right, and that allows us to shift the alphabet, you know, segment the plain alphabet and convert that into the shifted alphabet. And we're going to pass that call function in, and we're then also going to pass the shift in here as well. So this is where the passing of the shift comes in. So when I build this alphabet, which I have right here, all right, this is now going to allow me to pass in the value, all right, because that shift is coming from the local variable that we have right here, which again is being passed in through the button encrypt, which is coming from right here. All right, so once I click the button encrypt button, we're passing in the shift value, and then that shift value is being passed in here into the CaesarEncrypt function, which then is going to get passed into the cipher alphabet, which then get passed up here into this procedure here, which allows us now to segment out the text and start building the ciphered text that we have. Okay, so what I need to do next is I need to go through, every character, because I'm going to be pulling out, one letter at a time and spelling my new encrypted word. All right, so in order to do that, we're going to need to use a loop to kind of go through each value. All right, so all I'm going to do, go under Control, and you're just going to grab a for loop. All right, you don't want to use the for to each because we're not doing anything with lists here. We're just going to use the counting loop. All right, and so by default, it's going to have the word number here. So I'm just going to click on that and change the word number to K. All right, because ultimately what I want to do is I want to always, they call it the kth, K-T-H, kth character. I always want to grab the kth character, or the character that I'm specifically looking for, which is going to be related to the index within my plain text. All right, and then it's going to obviously be the value that I'm going to pull out from the word here, comparing it to the plain text alphabet. So what I'm going to iterate over is we're always going to start at 1 because we always want to start at the first letter. But what I want to count to is the letter that in question that I'm going to be looking for. All right, so in order to do that, or I should say not looking specifically for, but the letter that, or however many letters that are within my plain alphabet. All right, so if I click on my text here, we have a, there it is. We have a block that's called length, and the purpose of this is to get the length of how many text characters I have within the string. So I'm going to plug that in to the to field, and then I want to pass in the plain text word. All right, and so I'm going to just mouse over that, click on get plain text, and I'm going to plug that within here. All right, and again, remember that plain text is being passed in originally when I click on button encrypt, all right, from this component right here. Stored within this local variable here, and that's what we're accessing. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to get the letter that I want to, or that's within that plain text word, and then I want to convert that into my new word, and I want to do that based off of the index position that I have. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to utilize, obviously, the loop. I want to create my index so that I know that I'm pointing to the proper letter, so that, if I want to encrypt the word hello, that the H then encrypts into the proper letter, which should be K if we do a shift of 3. So in order to do that, now I'm going to use the character local over here. All right, so I'm going to grab a set function and plug that in. And now what I want to do is I want to segment, because I just want to get the value of the letter in question. All right, so the H, so to say, in the word hello. So in order to do that, I'm going to use the same segment function that I used up above when building the procedure here. All right, so I'm going to plug that in. And now the text that I'm going to pass into this, all right, is the plain text, which is the word that I want to grab from that text box on the design screen. And then where I want to start from is where I want, basically the iteration, the loop that's counting as we go along. Whenever we get to the word H, if that's, say, like the third iteration, well, then the loop is going to iterate 3 times, and then that is going to be my starting point. And the length that I want to get, the segment, is only 1, because I only want that one character. I don't want any other characters. All right, so once I have that, I'm now going to create the index, and then from there, we're going to set our index value to, we're going to now go into our text box here. We need to pass it a starting point, so we're going to use the starts at, and then we pass in the text and the piece. So the text that we're passing in, all right, is the full global plain alphabet, because we're going to want to start at A, and we're going to comb through all the way through Z. And then the piece that I want to pass in, all right, is the kth character, all right, and that's basically the character that I'm pulling out, and I want to compare that to, all right, and that's going to give me the index value of how many spaces that I am moving forward in order to grab that specific character. Now we need to put a condition in here, and that's because as you see within the text above, all right, there's no spaces, no commas, or anything. Well, what happens if, for whatever reason, the program, when running, encounters a space or encounters a comma or something like that? All right, well, because it's not accounted for, all right, it's going to pass in an index value of 0 because it's not listed anywhere. All right, and that will cause a big problem because if an index value of 0 passes in, it's out of the scope of 1 through length of list that we have, and our program would crash. So we're going to create a condition in here where we're going to create an if-else block, which will plug right below that index value. And what we're going to do is we're going to set the index equal to 0. That's our condition. So if we encounter a space or if we encounter a comma, what eventually will happen is that value will pass back as a 0. Now we're going to do a condition. If the index now, for whatever reason, was set to 0, then we just want to kind of pass that character through. And so ignore it, basically. So we'll pass the space through as is, or we'll pass the comma through as is. All right, and that's basically what this block is doing. Okay, we're taking the ciphertext that we're now building, and we're going to join the current value that's stored within ciphertext. And then we're getting that character, that whether it be the space or the comma, and we're just joining it together, and we're passing it or setting it into ciphertext. All right, passing it through, and that's it. So that will allow the program to register that, okay, if the index is 0, move it through. Therefore, our program will recognize that there is an index of 0, therefore pass it on, and therefore our program will not crash. Otherwise, if we're going through the string and there's no commas or spaces encountered, well, then we just want to build the ciphertext. All right, so we're again going to just mouse over our ciphertext, grab a set ciphertext, plug it in, and now we're going to use our join block, all right, from the text area up here. And now we are going to pass in the first input, which is the current build of ciphertext, and then the segment text of, again, the current value of the global cipher alphabet that we have, and then starting at the index value that we generate up here, and then the specific length, which is 1. So this is where we are basically going to convert the word hello, 1 letter at a time, into the word KHOOR when we do a shift of 3, 1 letter at a time. All right, and so once we build that, the last thing we need to do is we have to now return that value, all right, and back into this procedure, which then takes us back up here into this procedure. So at the bottom of the do block that we plugged into our local variable here, all right, there's a little input called result. So what I want to do now is I want to take now the newly built ciphertext, which is the ciphered word, grab a get ciphertext, and plug that in down into the result area. All right, so this will now return the result into our function, which is called CaesarEncrypt. That then takes that value and brings it now, when this is called, all right, CaesarEncrypt, and therefore passes that encrypted value into the text box here in order for it to display within my screen, which will be located under here under ciphertext. And if you knew what the ciphertext value was, you can then type the ciphertext here and then hit the decrypt function, which you're then going to need to now make it display within the plain text area. All right, so it kind of works both ways there. All right, so that is the cipher alphabet that, or the encryption portion that we built in class. The thing that you now need to do for the assignment for the week is, and I'll give you extra time on it, I know with everything that you got going on right now, but what you'll need to do is do the button decrypt, pull that out, right? You're then going to build the decryption piece. You also now need to, this you can call because the shift is the shift, you don't need to worry about changing any of that, but now what you'll need to do is you'll need to create another a return function procedure, and then what we can do is we can call this one Caesar decrypt. All right, and then that now is going to be what you need to build. You need to take this, what we have over here, this model, and you now need to build out this. It's for the most part, it's the same thing in reverse order. So think of that as a little hint or a little clue. All right, and then once you have that built and have those built, you can then obviously test your code, make sure that you're passing back the result, because you kind of still need like the local variable and the do block that we have over here. You'll loop through the process because you want to, again, loop through word by word of the encrypted text in order to decrypt it, and then obviously pass it back, once the button click is, like we have here, into the not ciphertext box, but the plain text box, and then that will then do the reverse process. All right, so that is what we did. So I'll stop the video there. If you have any questions, obviously reach out. But good luck with that, and then I'll try to get a Teams meeting going so that we can meet later tonight and go over any questions that you might have. All right, have a good one.